This is the Bowls of Life podcast. I'm Virginia.
And I'm Tyler. As we've gone through life, we've learned something important.
Life is messy. It gets complicated.
But we've also learned that we can create tools to help us jump into the mess of life and make an adventure of it.
Welcome to our messy adventures of faith, family, and food.
Yay! Back to the podcast.
Yeah, back to the podcast. We finished Habits of the Household.
12 episodes, if you were curious how many that was.
That's 12 weeks. That's 3 months.
It was not 12 weeks. Oh, wait, it was 12 weeks. Sorry, I was... Yep, brain. Sorry.
It's 12 weeks. We did one week, one podcast a week.
One podcast a week. Yes, you are completely accurate, and I was wrong. Yes.
You know, usually.
First of all, maybe. Second of all, hey.
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm tired.
What?
You know, time change. It's 9:44, but that actually means it's 10:44.
Yes, to your body. Yeah. It still feels that way. Yeah, that's accurate.
Yeah, that's what we'll be saying for the next
week.
Several weeks, I feel like.
Something like that. Yeah. Depends on how quickly our kids get adjusted to that.
Yes.
That's the real question.
Are anybody else's kids acting like, oh, I didn't
clean up the background.
We didn't clean up the background.
You know what? I also didn't turn the lights on, so the camera's pretty dark.
I was thinking it was different because it keeps like not getting my face. Look, there I go. I get dark.
Darkening. Yes.
And then it'll get me again.
Yeah.
I'll get light.
You talk for a second.
Okay, yeah, so
talk about time change or whatever.
Okay, time change is dumb. Oh, I was saying, are anybody else's kids it's so bright. Feels like a spotlight. Are anybody else's kids kind of going crazy with this time change? Which I know by the time you listen to this, it's going to be a couple weeks past. So never mind. Don't answer that question because it's not even applicable or relatable to you right now.
It could be.
If you're wondering, like, what just happened, something fell off the piano behind us.
I think the wind just blew a piece of paper down.
Yeah, the wind.
The fan. The
fan.
Wind from the fan.
It's still making me dark. I'm in a shadow or something.
Yeah. It's your body posture, maybe?
I mean, probably.
Yeah. It's the built-in lighting thing that it does. Anyway.
Well, okay, so we're moving on.
We are.
I hope you guys enjoyed Habits of the Household.
Yeah, no, it was thoroughly
it was
good.
Yeah, it was really
It was really good.
It was thoroughly
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It was thoroughly thorough. And we enjoyed reading that book again and talking about it. And we had a couple people like say how much they enjoyed it.
Yeah, picked up a copy. Yeah.
Yeah, and so again, like pick that book up if you haven't read it yet. And
we didn't talk about the thing.
The thing, okay.
Yeah.
What thing?
So a couple episodes into the series, I actually reached out to Justin Whitmell early to invite him on the podcast. And guess what, guys? He said no, which wasn't all that surprising. But, it was one of those shoot for the moon, see if you hit, or shoot for the stars and see if you hit the moon.
Yeah, land on the moon.
Land on the moon, whatever, that thing. And you know what? We somewhat got a landing. I got a response from his admin basically saying his fall schedule is already filled up, but feel free to try again in the future, which I think was just a kind, gentle way of saying, no, thank you.
Yeah.
But did also say, super excited to hear about the podcast. We'd actually like to send you guys a couple of books. So a few weeks later, like long enough where I started to go, I wonder if they forgot.
Yeah.
And you know what? If they wouldn't have been a big deal. Wouldn't have really mattered. But a couple weeks later, came in the mail the Bible study for Habits of the Household, which I think came out towards the end of 23, if I remember right. So the Bible study for Habits of the Household is like 6 sessions or whatever, reworked and broken up that way. And then also his most recent book, Made for People.
Yes.
Which is basically guy talking about the need of community, which is not the typical angle you get in those books. I feel like I think Jenny Allen made one. I forget exactly.
Oh goodness, I read it.
Can't remember the title of it right now.
Oh shoot, well, I'll come back to it.
Find your people.
I was like, it's something about people.
But typically you hear women authors talk on that subject a lot, not as much men, and so haven't read it yet, but looking forward to it. It's now in the short short list of books.
And he signed the book.
Yes, yeah,
like,
he did.
Personally,
both of them.
Tyler and Virginia.
And he signed something slightly different in both of them.
So
it wasn't
that was
just
really
his
nice.
go-to. Yeah.
Of him to do that. Like, it wasn't, they didn't just send us books. Like, I imagine these books were sitting on his desk. He opened them up. He wrote our names. Mm-hmm. So, like, that was really kind for him to take time out of his day to do that. And so, so we got 2 books, and Made for People might be one
down the road series. Yeah.
But we'll read it, and we'll let y'all know.
Yeah.
Our thoughts. Yeah. Speaking of books, like new books and writing and that sort of thing, we kind of already teased this a little bit, but today we're talking about something that Tyler created himself.
Created. I like that word. I thought you were going to say wrote, and I wasn't sure I was going to be comfortable with that.
You wrote and you created this book.
Yes. Journal.
Journal.
Yes.
Journal is a good word for it. So tell us about it.
Yes.
Name it and all of that.
Yep. So, Forming Your Life is the title I gave the first draft of it when I made it a year ago. So it's essentially a reflection, dreaming, and then habit tracking journal.
Yeah.
That came about over a couple of years, really. I've been slowly creating this.
Yeah.
So version 1 of it, that literally there is one single copy that I printed for myself and have been using across this year. Yeah, it has the more practical side of everything in it, but there was no explanation, no vision casting. There's really nothing that if someone else picked this up, I mean, they could figure it out after they stared at it for a few minutes of like, okay, what is this? How does it work? Like, I don't feel like it requires that much explanation. It was just like the action
part.
But the action part of it, yeah. But being able to put it in somebody else's hands without me first giving them a 20-minute spiel on it required writing what is about double the length of my average sermon. I did a word count on it the other day. I was just curious. So, yeah, it's one of the longer things I've written outside of maybe a school paper or 2.
So you created it last year.
Yes.
And you've been using it yourself.
Yes. Yeah. And really it was created probably 2-3 years ago. The very first version of it. That probably would have been 21.
It was paper printouts.
Yes.
That you would tape on the wall.
Yeah. At first it was taped on our bathroom mirror.
Yep, that's right.
The very original versions of it were on the bathroom mirror.
So you had gone through, I think, some sort of habit tracking something and started tracking some habits, but you wanted to track them in a specific way.
Yes.
That was individual to you, personalized to you, or it made sense in your head.
Right.
And so you created your own habit tracking kind of worksheet.
Yeah.
And you taped it to our bathroom mirror
every
and then
month
to the wall, and every month, and you would write your habits in and you'd track them. And I like the phrase, the quote that you had on that page. It always said not perfection but progression. This is not habit perfection but habit progression, like that. So it was because you kind of have that mindset that it's got to be perfect. So
which is why it's taken from 21 till now to actually get this thing put together in a way that's useful for someone else. It had to go through several iterations, and I finally just had to ship it and force myself to be done with it. Yeah. Because we needed to record a podcast about it.
Well, and you, got a little fire under your butt to get it done. But you've been using the journal that you've created for a year now.
Yeah.
How's it been going for you?
Yeah, it was pretty good. I have enjoyed having it together. It being on a wall or on the bathroom or whatever wasn't as useful in some ways, because I feel like it was literally, there was a small window of the day that I could touch it and track things on it and figure out what I was going to do with it. Being able to carry it around with me and did a little bit more than just the habit tracking side of it.
You used a journal part, like the blank journal part, to write sermon notes and daily prayers,
things like that.
Or even sometimes it kind of just seemed like they were journal entries.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and Tyler's journaling, if anybody needs to know, it's like 1 to 2 to 3 lines.
Oh, yeah. If it made it to 3 lines, that was a big journal entry.
Yeah. And this is the size of the book is not a large 8 by 10 or 8 by 11. So like the 2 to 3 lines is not much at all. No. So very just quick little things that you wanted to jot down.
Yeah.
Always sitting by you in a sermon, I'll see like, oh, that's a journal entry. And I'll read it.
Yeah, no, I try to hide them from you a little bit.
No, you don't. Doesn't seem like you do.
A little bit. I have to talk myself down.
Well, it's because it's a vulnerable thing, I'm sure.
Get out of my vulnerable journals, Virginia.
Yeah, where you talk about all
my feelings,
your
and
insecurities.
Hey, I don't talk about my insecurities. I bottle those up.
So anyway, so it's a journal.
Yes.
And it's a reflection as well as a kind of habit tracking type journal, but then there's also more to it where you can journal more freely, more openly. So Tyler will explain this as we go, but tell me about the significance of the title, like forming your life. What does that actually mean? Yeah,
well, I mean, it goes along a lot with habits of the household that we just finished up. In a lot of ways, it's the simple core principle. Like,
we've clearly been like impacted by some books we've read.
Yeah, that ultimately everything you're doing is forming who you're becoming. And so if your habits play a vital role in that, that means you got to take some time to think about what those are. And so, I came across author by the name of John Acuff. I think actually in the height of 2020 online things, he was looking to revamp his whole world because he's a professional speaker and there were no speaking things, so he turned to online courses, and one of them came across my feed somewhere. Don't remember how, who, what, why, but caught my attention, and so hopped into it. And the core principle was essentially, he called it reaching your full potential. Full potential course.
Yeah,
the full potential course.
Yeah, I remember you came to me, you were like, I want to do this, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, had to spend a few dollars on it, but it was vitally worth it. I still think about it and use a lot of the principles from it. I mean, plenty of things from this journal come from
what you learned.
Some of his teachings, learnings from that. And so there's this place of, okay, I'm good at thinking through, like, what are things I want to do, I'm pretty decent at even creating systems and structures to help things happen, but always that follow through was not the best. And I think most people feel that way. Like, you can dream up things all the time, but like, where's the follow through? Well, that's kind of where habit tracking comes into play. Is, okay, if you can put it on paper and say, well, here's the big goal, but here's how you break down to actually get to that point. Okay, well, now we can track either, one, is this something you're really actually willing to do? Because, there's lots of great dreams, like, I'm going to stretch every day. I put that down all the time, and there are many days and weeks that go by that I don't do any stretching of any sort, despite the fact that I'm highly inflexible and need to do that more often.
Right.
Because that's not a real goal I actually care about. And it's proven tangible in these habit tracking sheets that I've had over the years, because every time I actually put it as a habit, it starts okay but never goes very long. And so habit tracking proves, like, okay, I don't care about that, so let's stop lying to myself that that's something I'm going to do, because I'm clearly not. But on the other side of it, there are things I care enough about to chase but don't always remember to make time for it in the day. And so you get to the end of the day and it's like, oh crap, well, I didn't spend a few minutes in my Bible today. It's not that I didn't want to. It's just I didn't carve out a space for it. And so start seeing that consistently and going, okay, I miss it every Wednesday. Okay, what about Wednesdays is making me miss this? Oh, it's because my schedule gets flipped on its head on Wednesdays, and I haven't actually figured out where it fits in that weird Wednesday schedule. And so being able to just tangibly see what you are or aren't doing, like, a lot of value in that. And I think last year, actually, how this one kind of started, or it was the beginning of 23, actually, when you and I got away for a couple of days and did some planning and goal setting for the year, the kind of opening part of this journal is reflecting on technically the past year, but you could take it further than that, just reflecting on your past in general.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going, as the kind of quote goes. But more so that when you kind of look at the past, I think there's often a draw in our mind to remember the negative. And I know, like, I'm a pessimistic person in general, and so I definitely do that. But I think it's true for most people. Our brains just, they latch on to things that had negative feelings, and we tend to highlight those in our brain. I mean, how often do you remember awkward moments or uncomfortable things you said or did in front of crowds? I can tell you one in particular that happened in Australia that my brain goes to at least once a week. Was that 8 years ago? Yes,
once a week?
I'm not even being sarcastic. Like, I'm not exaggerating. There's, like, once a week, this stupid intrusive thought of this dumb thing that does not matter hops into my head. And I feel bad about it.
Okay.
All the time. And so that's the kind of things our brain latches onto. And so in reflection, obviously those things come up still, and there can be some pain in that. But a lot of times, when you really sit down with it, there's a lot more good going on than you remember as well. Especially if you are taking the time to even do just like 2-3 sentence journal entries somewhere along the way. Think of one in particular in a journal that I will twice, 3 times a year write some things in. One of the first entries in it was actually one of my first years in student ministry, and I built out this whole plan, system, whatever, of roping in some volunteers to help kind of create a stronger student ministry where I was. Ultimately, it didn't work out because I could never get the buy-in from the people I needed it from to make that happen. But the first time I looked back at that, like 6 years after the fact, I went, oh, like I was doing and trying to build things and trying to make things better. Like, because when I just think of it offhand, I tend to go, oh man, if I could go back with the stuff I know now, and like, yeah, sure, absolutely, I would do it better. There's no question of that. But it wasn't that I wasn't doing and trying my best and then and like growing in it. I just don't always remember that. My brain latches on to the negatives.
Oh, your brain's telling you that you didn't do good enough.
Yeah, you didn't do it right.
Well, and that kind of matches your Enneagram.
Absolutely, it does.
Your personality, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so being able to reflect on it can often be painful, but there's a lot of good celebration in the past as well, that then kind of primes you to go, oh, well, these are things I was actually doing well. Maybe these are areas I can build on, and maybe these other areas that I wasn't, I can build on those in some ways as well.
Okay, so if you're reflecting back, you said it could be, the past year, or it could be just on your past.
Yeah.
What are some ways that you break it down so that people know kind of how to reflect, what to reflect on?
Valid. One, I do actually have a couple of reflection questions in there, several of those, but I break them down, reflection and then later into dreaming as well, into kind of 4 broad categories of spiritual, relational, personal, and vocational. Obviously, you could break that down further. I mean, you go 8 dimensions of wellness or whatever. There's a ton of categories, but I was just trying to think of broad enough that it gave you some different areas to focus on without like going, okay, you got to think about this specific thing and this specific thing. And this,
right.
Like, it's okay if some of these things overlap. Like personal is real ambiguous. What do you mean by personal? I don't know. What do you mean by personal? But yeah, each one of them I think has 5 different reflection questions that you don't necessarily have to use, but they're more there just as jump off points to kind of get your brain rolling so you can sit down and think through it. Some of it might be, personally, I really need to pick up the fasting practice, but it may also be, in the past year, I noticed that our oldest really seems to like to dance, and so maybe we need to try and get her into dance classes, because that's kind of where some of those conversations happen for us.
Yeah.
And these kind of things. So, it gives a lot of room for thinking about your life
All kinds of things.
holistically.
Yeah.
To use a catchy buzzword.
Yeah. So, from reflection, if we're getting to like a goal setting, habit tracking sort of thing, what comes next after reflection?
Yeah, so that's dreaming.
Okay.
Dreaming of the future, so to speak. And when I talk about dreaming of the future, like there's obviously, a dream of living in Hawaii. There's those kind of dreams. And you can put those on there if you feel like that's something you're going to actively pursue trying to get towards.
Yeah.
But this is more focused on, like, who are you becoming? Like, what are the things you're doing, and who are they making you to be?
Yeah.
Who are they shaping you into? Who are they forming you into? Go with the title of it. And so it's kind of dreaming in those same 4 categories of, okay, who do I want to become in the future? And this one's just like, throw it at the wall. If you think of it and you want to write it down, sweet. Trying to think of some dreams, like you may go really practical, like, I don't read a lot of books, and so I read 1 book this year. Maybe next year I want to read 5 books.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be ridiculous and say I want to read 32 books next year.
Yeah.
That's dumb. You read 1 this year. Let's aim lower. Real practical, easy ones like that, but they can also be a little more ambiguous of like, I want Bowls of Life to become a source of income for my family. I was like, okay, we'll put that on there, but like, what's that mean? What's that look like? I don't know. How's that going to turn into a habit? I don't know. We'll get there.
Yeah.
But it's just throwing
like
things at the wall and
a brain dump.
Yeah, brain dump. That's a good phrase for it.
Yeah.
So just kind of dreaming of who you want to be in the future and what could help you get to that kind of place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens after you dream?
Well, then you got to put it into some sort of practice, because the reflection is great. Kind of gives you time to celebrate things maybe God's been doing in your life. Gives you time to heal from some past things. Dreaming's great because that's always the fun part of just like looking to the future kind of stuff. But then, you got to put it into practice. And I think that's the hard part, and that's where a lot of the strength of this actually lies in, is getting into that future piece.
Yeah.
And so I call it practice in the book, because that's what you're going to do. You're going to practice. You're not going for perfection, just progression. It's not about performance. It's just practice.
Right.
And so in practice, the kind of kicking it off is taking those dream goals that you have and then saying, okay, what's a step to get there, and kind of help that make sense. I used, again, John Acuff's framework. He wrote a book, All It Takes Is a Goal, I believe is the name of that one. He talks about easy goals, medium goals, and the next obvious one would be a hard goal,
right,
except he actually calls it a guaranteed goal.
Okay.
And so the concept is you start with an easy goal. Let's take Bible reading, for instance. I want to read the Bible. Okay, well, you could say it's January 1 and I'm going to read the whole Bible this year. Okay, that's great. And maybe you do that.
Yeah.
Maybe you buckle down and you manage that. Some people do, but most people don't. And part of that's just the simple fact that you didn't read the Bible at all last year, or barely at all. So you have no Bible reading habit, and now you're trying to read 6-7 chapters a day. That's too much. You're not going to get there. So it might literally be, okay, pick a book of the Bible and read 1 verse a day. And that's going to feel like too little, but that's your easy goal. It's not actually as much about what you're getting from reading the Bible as it is about just building the habit of daily opening your Bible and reading something. And then along the way, as that easy goal kind of sets in, it becomes more natural. Then you can bump it up to a medium goal where maybe it's reading 1 chapter a day. And so once you've become consistent with medium goal, you eventually get to what will be a guaranteed goal, to the point to where it's like you almost can't accomplish it because you've just made it such a natural part of your life, where now it's, okay, I will read 3, 4, 5 chapters a day, and that will manage to get me through the entire Bible in the next year or so. But it's just starting small. And so you look at those dream goals and say, what's a really easy goal that I could attach to this? And does that goal look like something I need to do daily, or is it something that's more, is it a weekly goal? I even have monthly, and I call them quarterly. Like, I think of quarterly as something like a family getaway. Like, you're not going to do that every month, but I still like to put it on my habit tracking, because if I don't, I won't remember to plan it, and then 5-6 months will have passed by and nothing will happen. So, yeah, and it's just kind of determining where those fall.
Yep. Yeah, so you go from easy to medium to guaranteed goals.
Right.
And how do you get from that to like long-lasting practices?
Good question. I don't know if I have a go to long-lasting practices. I think by the time you get to the guaranteed goal part of it, it's something that really has become fairly natural.
Yeah.
Where the habit tracking side of it is less of a reminder and maybe more of just accountability of like, hey, are you still following through on this? Have you let these things fall to the wayside?
Sounds like it's about staying intentional at that point.
Yes.
Because it could fall to the wayside.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's any practice. At one point, one of them I was tracking very early on, I think was flossing. And I did that for a while, and then I quit tracking it, and I don't floss very much ever.
Yeah. That was your first one that you're like,
yeah.
It was like John Acuff said, like, try flossing.
No, actually, it's Craig Rochelle, a pastor. He was like, yeah, it was the first thing I became disciplined in, and now dude is more disciplined than anything. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah. So things that you stop tracking might fall to the wayside because you're not being intentional.
Yeah, you're not thinking
about them.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's important to continue tracking for your, for this purpose of continuing doing what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Even though it's coming to you naturally at that point.
Yeah.
Right. So what are some practices, like what are we, what would you say are some practices that we're potentially aiming for here, like as believers?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's where this is different from the average habit tracker. The system in and of itself isn't necessarily all that different, but the focus and some of the stuff that's written at the beginning of it and point to throughout it is the marrying of tracking habits like maybe flossing or reading, things like that, alongside a lot of spiritual practices, things that Jesus would have been doing in his daily life, because ultimately that's really the goal here, is to become more like Jesus.
Yeah.
It's that we're forming our life to look like the one we're made in the image of. And so for that's where my John Acuff meets my John Mark Comer interests. And so genuinely all of this kind of comes from the two of them colliding in my world.
Yeah.
And so John Acuff, very systems and processes and habits, where John Mark Comer's more focused on taking practices of Jesus and turning them into habits in a lot of ways, to make sure your faith is more than just a Sunday belief system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your question was, what are some to do, though, right?
Yeah, but no, I'm glad you, like, what makes this different than just any normal habit tracking journal, goal setting journal.
Right, yeah.
Is that there's a spiritual, faith-based side to it.
Yeah, it's, in my opinion, the bigger side of it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love what you said. You even wrote this in there, that it's the marrying of the ideas from John Acuff and the spiritual practices from John Mark Comer.
Right. And
forming this journal in a way that lives out, puts into action some of those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So what are those practices?
Yeah.
Spiritual ones.
Yeah. So John Mark Comer and Practicing the Way, the organization he kind of started, they focus in on 9 of them, and I definitely won't list all 9 of them properly right now because I don't remember them that well. But it's things like Sabbath, silence and solitude. There's prayer, fasting, Bible reading, generosity, witness, aka sharing the gospel. There's 2 more on here that are obvious that I'm missing. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I can't think of them either.
I can't remember the ones I've said now to be able to say the ones I didn't. But for that, you can kind of look towards practicing the way, which is one of the things I kind of mentioned towards the latter half of the book. I think I kind of put this in the dreaming section, where it's just talking about the fact that as you dream, you also want to make sure your part of your dreams are who you're becoming in Jesus. Community and service.
I knew community. I almost said that.
Yeah. See, I'm a dude and I forget community, just like I said at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's not as much of the thing we're outwardly drawn to. Anyway, but yeah, community and service, the other 2 there. Yeah, those are kind of 9 practices they identified that within them there are some like sub practices, if you will, but you could say just about anything you see in the life of in the life of Jesus as something he did would fall in one of those kind of areas. And so with this, it's trying to figure out, okay, Bible reading, like that's an obvious one. That's an easy, daily, trackable one. But what about generosity? What's that look like? Okay, well, maybe it's tithing or something like that, but there's a lot more to generosity than tithing. What about service or community? Some of those that are just a little less tangible. Take a little more time to figure out, okay, what's that look like if it is something you're needing to practice. It may, or track, I mean. It may not be something you need to track. Like for us, I don't really track. Well, I actually do track community. There's a couple of people I try to catch up with at least once a quarter and grab lunch with, things like that, to make sure. And honestly, I probably wouldn't be as intentional and wouldn't do that with those couple of guys if it wasn't in my journal to remind me, like, hey, it's been 2 months since you did that. Hey, or you're actually coming to the end of a whole quarter and you haven't hung out with that person. Like, you gonna make that happen or no?
And
like,
how intentional it is, like the intentionality behind that is that you're not just like relying on your memory or even like, you know, you're not relying on just yourself to automatically remember to reach out to that person and schedule that lunch. It's kind of that whole idea of like, hey, if we're going to say we need to hang out, we need to actually put it on the calendar.
Put it on the calendar. It's not real.
You're doing that kind of like ahead of time.
Yeah.
You're putting it down to say like, make sure you at least attempt.
Yes.
You know, to reach out to this person and try to get lunch or what have you. And if you did not do that, like it would be a year or it would be, like you said, like several months before that person. And it's not that you're not thinking of that person.
But the moments you think of them aren't moments you can text them or call them to try and set something up. And so then you're like, okay, I'll do that when I get wherever. But by the time you get wherever, you've forgotten about it. And now
so
3 more weeks go by. Yeah, it's not the romantic idea of we'll just impromptu hang out whenever. That's not the real world.
It's more thoughtful.
Yes.
Because you're saying, yeah, every 3 months, I'm going to check in with this person because I care deeply about them.
And these are people that I interact with more than that, but these are more like long-term, one-on-one, face-to-face catch-up kind of things.
Yeah. But other community, no, you're not really tracking. We like community.
But yeah, they're like fasting. That's not a regular practice for very many people in America. And so it's one of those that it requires me putting it on the calendar, and that's looked different in different seasons. There was a while there where I was doing it somewhat weekly or at least monthly. Our schedules changed, and it's made it a little more difficult to do with small kids and just chaos of some of our scheduled things, but it's still on there as more of a monthly to quarterly.
Well, just again, a reminder to say like, hey, like this is a practice you still value and you still want to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, the 9 practices that you you brought in from John Mark Comer's Practicing the Way, you inserted them into this journal. You explained them a little bit, and in order to help people see that there are specific spiritual things that they need to be looking at, or
Yeah.
that they could be looking at
Yeah.
to develop their spiritual formation.
Right. And they're tangible, and they can be done in our 21st century life. Like, that's probably the biggest thing about it, is like, these are all accessible things. What exactly they look like for you can be totally different from the person beside you. That's not the point. The point is just to start drawing them to your mind and going, okay, how can I do that in my world? I think that's a big thing that I'm trying to highlight throughout it, because I need that. Like, ultimately, that's where all of this thing comes from. It's just like, I developed a system and thought processes of things I needed and that worked for me, but I've now expanded it out to make it a little more accessible outside of my brain to other people, and I think can be helpful for others. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you open the book, you have, like we said, a few pages where you're explaining what the sections are, how to do them, reflect, dream, practice,
and record is the last one, and that one's just the 100 or so blank pages at the back. I do there kind of highlight morning and evening thing I do that might be helpful for some people, but
so it's like we said kind of before, it's an open journal that you could do different things with, and you do give some ideas of some ways you can utilize it. So has anybody but you done this?
Absolutely not. You have not asked to, and it's not as much your personality to track habits and things like that. And I have not put it in anybody else's hands. To the best of my knowledge, let me say this: the very original tracker that I made is available on Bowls of Life for free. Has been up there for a little while. I don't know if anyone's downloaded it or not. I haven't specifically looked at that. But to my knowledge, no one really has.
So you could kind of get a taste if you look into that.
Yep.
And that's how you started.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so you said personality thing. Sure. Like,
this is definitely geared to somebody who is drawn to planning in a lot of ways. Somebody who, thinks through their day beforehand a little bit, for sure. But I think it's general enough that anybody can pick it up. Like, I give space for 20 daily, weekly, or monthly habits, and that's 20 daily, 20 weekly, 20 monthly. But
You're not filling all those out.
Yeah, I don't fill all those out. Actually, this is be the first time I've given myself that many, and it's mostly just because I've started developing so many that there are some that I still want to be tracking, but there are others that I need to track to start doing them.
Right.
And so it's really just to give myself a little more space. I don't think people should definitely start at that.
So it's like a check off.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So you check off also. They have that for the daily, like daily.
Yes.
Yep, I did that. Yep, I did that.
Yep.
Monthly. Yep,
Kind
I
of
did that.
Tally, keeping up with what you did or didn't do. And it is rare that I have a day that I did every single one of them.
Or a week.
And I don't think I ever have weeks that I
you
do them all.
specifically leave Saturdays off.
Yes, don't track on a Saturday. One, I'm not doing a large majority of those anyway because it's our Sabbath day, and I'm trying to not do many of those things. But also, I just think it's healthy to have as the workout people would say, a cheat day. To not be on top of all the things.
I hate that terminology because it makes it sound like you're doing something wrong when you're actually doing something right.
Right, yeah, it is wise and good.
So I think that while yes, there is a personality driven thing here, the New Year is coming up, and I think that people really benefit from, even if it doesn't happen at the New Year.
Yeah.
But I think people will really benefit to take some time to reflect and dream and kind of think about what they want their next year to look like. Or like you said, like you're thinking, you actually wrote this in there about dreaming backwards. You go all the way to like what you're wanting to achieve, what you want to become, who you want to become, which Jesus is, obviously who you want to be more like, but what does that look like in your personality, individuality? And so you work backwards. So I think it's definitely, I know I've done similar things. And even though I may not be doing the daily habit trackers, being able to reflect on the past year is really, it's really nice to do that. It's really nice to think back on the things that went well, that were great, were joy-filled. I think I do tend to lean more towards the positive than I do than the negative. Yeah. Again, that's a personality thing. But I also have to remember the things I grieved. Like I remember the year my grandfather died. That was so he died, and then the following year was when I did like a reflection at the beginning of the new year. And I was like, okay, the question was things to grieve from the past year. And it was like, oh, I lost my grandfather. Because, I mean, it had happened at like the beginning of the last year. So it was like, oh, I really hadn't thought about that much lately. And so I was able to look like to grieve him for a minute, but also to like remember him.
Right.
And so there were other things too, like dreaming about what the year is going to look like, what I want it to look like, what it's like in business ventures too, like what I want to do in those worlds. So I'm saying this to say that like, even if you weren't wanting to just completely marry into the daily checking off of habits and weekly checking off of habits, which again are very helpful for the right people.
Yep. I think it's helpful for all people. It's just the other people who chafe against it are probably the ones who need it most, but I'm just throwing that out there.
Are you trying to talk about me?
Maybe. People in general, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyways, we don't have to have that conversation now. I don't like to be boxed in. Okay?
Yeah. I know you don't.
But just being able to, reflect and dream and do all that kind of stuff, I think many people will benefit on doing that. Like you said, reflecting even on your past self, I think is super important. Things that you experienced that were done to you, that you did to people or yourself, and reflecting back on that can be a really healing process. It might need to be done with professional help too, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
Or at least like, another person. But yeah, I just wanted to say you don't necessarily have to be that like type A planner person for this to bring you some benefit and bring you some habit change, So yeah. So a few more questions. So on that note, like where would you recommend somebody start when it comes to forming your life?
Forming your life. Habits in the household is obviously a good one.
Right.
That was definitely one that's focused on that. If you're looking to go a little less family specific and more individualistic, I guess is technically the right word. Practicing the Ways, book by John Mark Comer. It was not the one that started this journey, but it is one he's written later on in me listening to his teachings, I guess. But anyway, it's kind of the summary of all the things, spiritual practices. So that one's definitely a really great spot. I think Ruthless Elimination of Hurry was the book that kind of started me down all of this road. Mostly just because it scratched an itch that I desperately had. Deep need of soul satisfaction isn't the right word. Soul rest in a lot of ways of, those are two good ones. Another one, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, Pete Scazzaro. similar things as Colmer, but from different angles. And so always appreciate just someone who takes it from a different direction.
Yeah, so you're recommending some books to read.
Yes, yeah. Those are good. If podcasting world, Practicing the Way is a podcast. It was a short, limited series on the book. And so you can kind of get a taste of all of it there. I think there's even a Bible reading plan on the YouVersion Bible app that kind of goes through it across about a week. So you can get the real quick version of it. Trying to think of other good resources.
Well, let me ask you this, because you did put a list of resources in your book.
Yeah.
So, and we can share those maybe written in another place if you want
absolutely.
to. But what about, like, because we did mention the new year, like time of the year, is it dated? Do you have to
so
start at the new year or start whenever you want?
No, you don't have to start. It's 12 months long.
Okay.
And so every start of a month or quarter, there's each of the 12 months on that sheet, and so you actually just kind of circle this is January or April or whatever. So you technically start at any point and run for 12 months. Obviously, it most naturally fits starting a year, just because that's the way our brains work.
Yeah.
But it is by no means tied to specific dates.
Yeah, and can you pick it up and put it down if you wanted to take a pause from it?
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, that's easily done. There were definitely been a few seasons or a month or two along the way where I've not tracked for various reasons.
Pick it back up.
Yeah, pick it back up later, and that's not a big deal at all.
You might go back through the reflection and stuff just to make sure you're still wanting to do what you want to do. But if it's been a short time, you can probably just pick it back up.
Yeah, actually, each quarter ends with reflections for that quarter as well. So it's continually helping you look back and see the way you've grown. Again, to just because it's momentum building and that helps propel us forward, but also just kind of be able to celebrate alongside God, or as you said, grieve and the more difficult things that are along the way.
Okay, so I want to ask this question. What are some common obstacles you see people face when it comes to building spiritual habits or forming their life into what they really want to see?
The two biggest is your time waste on a phone.
Time wasted on a phone.
Just all the things tied to that. And then the other one is just a overfull calendar. I think those are probably just the two biggest things. Like, if there's not space, there's not space. There's 24 hours in a day, and you need more sleep than you're probably getting. Amen to all the parents, or from all the parents. And I think those are probably the two biggest things. Like, the amount of time. I laughed. I listened to a podcast recently where a guy, and granted, like, social media influencing is kind of his job. He does it. He's a Christian influencer, whatever. But he was talking about something that's took him on a really long spiritual journey, where one day the end of week thing that pops up that tells you how long you averaged on your iPhone that week, and it was like 7.5 hours. And he said it just kind of grabbed me. It was like 7.5 hours. Like, let's just round it down to 7. That's 49 hours that I spent on this phone this week alone. And then you can carry the math. I can't do that quickly in my head. And I think he found, like, in 10 years time, he was spending 3 years on his phone.
Wow.
Like, if that was his weekly average. And it was like, oh, what else could I be doing with that time? You can learn a whole nother language in that amount of time.
Yeah, I think it was Emily Morrow from Really Very Crunchy on her podcast, actually. No, in her book. She was talking about when she stopped consuming medias, and she's a social media presence. But when she stopped consuming so much media, she found that she was creating so much more. So creating in her home, such as like cooking, baking, making, because she wanted to learn how to sew. And I know that's like, okay, that's Virginia, that's your world right now. But like, it just like,
it's the same things.
Same thing. Like, journal, like, think about how much consuming you're having on your phone or anything else, and not able to do something that you actually want to do, like form your life in a different way.
Yeah.
Is there a personal challenge like that you haven't shared that you faced that kind of really, I think the question is, you mentioned this in the book, but what was it that you were really longing for when you came to the
Oh, yeah. I mean,
to this?
I think said it to some extent at the front end of this, but I mean, always have good ideas of who I would like to be in the future.
Yeah.
But the practical of walking it out is always way more difficult because there's a video game that I could play that I'm always going to be drawn to play another video game and drop 2-3 hours into that.
Yeah.
There's always another TV show or movie to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always another book to read for that matter. And,
Yeah.
you know, I'll elevate book reading above the other two I just mentioned as something that's quality for you to be doing. But nonetheless, like, you can lose your life in just reading books all the time.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, it was always choosing the easier thing than the hard things.
Yeah.
But yet it's the hard things that are going to provide the most satisfaction and fulfillment in your life 9 times out of 10. Like, easy things are easy and you could do them and enjoy them in the moment, but they're the things that leave you hungry the longest. I mean, it's the difference in sugar and protein foods. Like, one is going to leave you wanting more and the other is going to leave you filled.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of that alongside of just that recognition that even being someone who literally works in church, and church is life in a lot of ways, for me, there's still a lot of things internal things. Wasn't the big outward massive sins that make for the really cool testimonies of, oh man, they did so many horrible things, what a great testimony. That's whatever, sorry, jokes. But anyway, it's not those things, it's just those internal things of, man, always got low grade anxiety or anger or just never feeling satisfied with life, like those kind of things going on underneath the surface that taking the time to be intentional with spiritual habits that to some could feel like legalism, but I would say in our very hedonistic culture that we live in right now, a little bit of legalism's probably not going to kill very many people.
Yeah.
Now, do you need to take this to a legalistic standard? Absolutely not. And that's why I made sure to say, like, I rarely have days that I do all the things.
Legalism is more about how we think than what we do.
Yes, absolutely it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like right now, being lackadaisical, being passive is more the default when it comes to spirituality. It's just like, oh, you know, I believe in God and I feel Him sometimes, and I like to go to church often, but like that's as far as it takes us.
Yeah.
That's not going to form us very deeply.
Right.
But when we start walking out the practices, I mean, plenty of them as a pastor that I was not walking out until I started putting on paper, like, hey, when was the last time you actually fasted? Oh, it's been 4 years. Okay, maybe you should look into that a little bit. Things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what's next for you?
What's next for me? Ooh, gonna write whole books
I really
next.
wanted to ask that question.
Yes, I know. That was one that the AI threw out as a potential question.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's next for me is to try and get just like 1 or 2 people to give this a go and check it out. And that being said, it will be on the resource side of bowlsoflife.com, and I'm going to put it on there in 2 different formats. So one is a hard copy, like hardback journal that
you have it right here.
I have, yeah. Well,
you have yours.
This is the previous version. I haven't actually made the cover of this current version that you'll be able to purchase. Got to finish that up, but you'll be able to purchase that through a secondary website that does print on demand for you.
Yeah.
Or if you don't want a hard copy, I'll also just put the digital download of it on there as well.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's cool.
That's
awesome.
all I can think of.
Well, thank you for sharing with us your new creation.
Yeah. Thanks for reading it. And hey, wait, no, flip it around. That's actually the next question. thoughts, feedback? You haven't actually given
Are you asking me to do
yes,
this right
live
now?
on the air. Yes, you literally read it before we recorded. So, feedback, thoughts. I'd love to hear it. Some of your feedback could potentially affect little things that get changed before people purchase this.
I, first off, was a very proud wife as I was reading it.
Don't hit me with those nonsense.
No, but it was really cool, like seeing all of the things that you have been doing over the past 3 years put into a format that people can put their hands on and then live out something that we are constantly trying to convince people to do is worth doing, right? And I think like kind of what you said about like, okay, this is not a book.
No.
The first part that you do read, it is very short.
Yeah, it's like what, 20 pages if that long?
Yeah, and they're short. This is short pages. This is not big pages. So
6,000 words.
Yeah, so like a 25 minute read, and then the reading is a lot of what we said today, what we say a lot on the podcast.
Much of it's just explaining the process. There's a lot of why, but there's plenty of what.
So this is not just something you pick up and you really just read it and then you're done with it.
You move on to the next thing. This is
something that you stick with, you implement, you activate for a year. And and I think that's what's going to be really cool for people who hear you as a preacher, as a friend, as a life group leader, as a podcaster, constantly say, read your Bible, pray, fast, do these spiritual practices, become more like Jesus. Here's some ways in how you do that. This is like actually giving them something that they can practically do. And they have the background they need, and then they have other resources they can turn to if they wish. But it's a tangible, practical journal, that will really, I think, catapult people into changing the trajectory of their life. You know, not just no longer being passive in their faith, but being active members of their church community and active members or active believer in the kingdom of God. You know, because now they're thinking about how can I serve, or how can I give, or how can I fast and pray for that situation in my family or in my community that will move God. You know, so, you know, that's where I see it's going to be a really like pivotal thing for people, is that it actually gives you the opportunity to create change. It's not just talking about it.
Right.
It's doing it. So that's some of my feedback there. I think that we talked about personality differences, but I think that again, it could be beneficial to utilize these concepts and practices, because I've even used them. I may not use it the way that you use it, but I've used types of reflections and dreaming things that have caused me to be more intentional, have caused me to be more active in my faith and in my daily life. So any other feedback? I think that you do a great job of explaining like what you're actually doing as far as like when it comes to reflection and the spiritual practices that you do. Like, you don't just say like scripture, you know, like you explain it. And I know you pulled some stuff from the information that you were reading, external resources. But sometimes, just like we kind of did the whole Habits of the Household podcast, sometimes people need, that's why we have community, right? That's why we have book clubs, because we want to read a book together and we want to talk about it. Well, you did that. You read some books and now you're talking about it and you're giving people some pathways that they can follow. And, you know, creating a community out of it too. Could be. Yeah. So anything else? I don't know. You put me on the spot.
You're welcome.
I didn't like make notes.
That's okay. I didn't expect you to make notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can talk about a recipe.
Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to ask. But before you do that, let's take a quick ad break.
Okay. So, so we made this soup tonight. Was it good?
Yeah.
Okay.
We all ate it.
Yeah. And
That
so
was a
even
win.
the kids were like, yum. Okay. So chicken, we can call it chicken tortilla soup, if you will.
You called it Mexican soup to Luna.
Right. A chicken, Mexican soup. So that she understood that it's.
No, that's good
Because
contextualization.
she loves Mexican.
She does.
She needed to know that she would like it.
She wants the
and
beans.
she tasted it and she liked
she
it.
wants the cheese dip.
Yeah. So
you didn't even have any beans this time, or there was beans in the soup.
beans.
I guess.
Yeah, there was white beans. So what I want to say here is like soups. We have recipes for them for valid reasons. But don't get caught up in needing a recipe to make a soup. Maybe you can utilize a recipe here or there. But like if you're someone who keeps food in your pantry, which I'm still not like a super hoarder when it comes to food in the pantry.
Yeah.
But like if you're someone who keeps food, especially canned food in your pantry, then I promise you can make a soup in 5 minutes or put it together in 5 minutes.
Right.
Let it simmer.
Yeah.
And you did not have to like meal plate, like that did not take a lot of effort. So tonight it was just, I had frozen chicken and I'm trying to think, what can I do with frozen chicken? And since it was rainy, I was like, soup sounds good. But, I did go off of a Bowls of Life recipe that I created myself, which, doesn't always happen. It was the first recipe I created myself. Let me put it that way. Like I literally went to the pantry and like created a recipe, versus like using a recipe and adapting it. But anyways, I did use that tonight, but I didn't have enchilada sauce. And so it wasn't an enchilada soup, but black beans, corn. I didn't have chicken broth. So I just used water. And of course I added a little extra salt. So the saltiness would be there. Cumin, paprika, salt and pepper, garlic, onion, red bell pepper, diced tomatoes, rotel is the name of that, diced tomatoes and chili. And I had half a block of cream cheese, and so I knew I wanted it to have some creaminess, so I put that in there. And we used the Instant Pot, so it cooked up that frozen chicken like really quickly.
Yep.
It's not instant, y'all. It's not instant. Don't get confused by the name.
Instant-ish.
Yeah, but it still is a lot quicker because of the pressure cooking that it does.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's a
Yeah.
pressure cooker.
So, and it was really yummy.
It was
We
really
had it with
yummy.
tortilla chips. I had a little queso, so we had that on the side. And,
Yeah.
I just say all that to say, don't necessarily feel like you have to follow that recipe, but like you probably have all you need in your pantry to make a soup. And it's soup season, not yet because it's still kind of hot outside. But it was raining, so that's why I felt like it worked.
This won't air till the end of November-ish.
That's true. So it might
should
be colder
cold
by now.
then, or at least cool.
Yeah. Well, anyways, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you guys for hanging out and listening to the journal. Thanks for having a conversation with me about it, Virginia. I never really like to talk about it because it feels weird and
you
stuff
did
to
great.
talk about things that I'm doing. So thanks for asking questions and stuff.
Well, here's some things that you guys can do. You can obviously check out Forming Your Life on the website on our resource page. And like we said, if you wanted to check out what the tracker looks like, we do have a downloadable version, free version of that, but you don't want to miss out on the rest of the journal. So check that out. Christmas is coming up. New Year is coming up. So really this is the perfect time for this book to be launching. This journal to be launching. So definitely go to bowlsoflife.com and check out the resources. And those resources are designed to help you make an adventure out of your faith, family, and food. Forming Your Life is all about faith, and could be family as well. So, check us out, bowlsoflife.com. We'll see you there.